What do you think about fecal transplants?
That could be revolutionary for people. There are some people who do DIY. Someone took their mother's feces, but then they inserted it into themselves and kind of resolved their chronic gut issues.
Today, I'm so excited to have Dr. Karan Rajan on the podcast. He is a doctor surgeon and one of the most followed doctors on social media. He is known for his ability to debunk health myths and explain complex medical science in relatable ways. Or how do you eat?
I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, but what I've done is I've cut down the concentration of meat that I eat. I love barley because barley is rich in beta-glucan, which is a type of prebiotic that's been shown in preliminary studies to reduce the microplastic load in the human body.
So what would you say to those individuals that are really just proclaiming from the rooftops that we don't need fiber?
Often I've found in patients I've seen over the years who've gone on the carnivore diet, when they cut fiber out of their diet and feel good, that is a symptom of something wrong systemically. Someone thinks that, okay, I've just had fiber, it's caused these GI symptoms like bloating and gas, I need to get rid of fiber. And then they get rid of fiber and then they feel good temporarily for a few weeks, maybe a few months. But long term, you need to fix the system. There's an issue with your system where you're not training your microbiome efficiently and your bacteria haven't adapted to the fiber load. What happens is that
Well, today I'm so excited to have Dr. Karan Rajan on the podcast. He is a doctor surgeon and one of the most followed doctors on social media. He is known for his ability to debunk health myths and explain complex medical science in relatable ways. His content educates millions on how the body truly works, and his mission is to make evidence-based medicine engaging and accessible while fighting misinformation across the wellness industry. He regularly appears on BBC, ITV, and major global outlets, and his first book, This Book May Save Your Life, explores the human body's resilience and science behind healthy living. And you are definitely an expert in the microbiome, which we will be talking about today.
yeah, can't wait, and thank you for having me.
Of course, you came all the way. We swapped this week. I was in the UK, now you're in London, and now we are doing a podcast together.
I know, this is the first time I'm in Texas, and your place certainly feels like the Texas I see in movies.
Yeah, we're a bit remote, but I like it because very relaxing and calming, but it's not too far out from downtown. So.
It's the same reason I moved out of London. I used to live in London, for almost all my life. I moved out to the countryside because I want fresh air, I want forest, nature, good walks, and just less pollution and stress.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we don't have to go into this now, but it certainly matters, your environment, right? Because I saw, as I've been tracking this total toxic burden for so many years, I moved from Ohio to LA and then saw an increase. And then I moved from LA to here and then saw a decrease. So it really does, matter. So all right. I can't wait to get into all things microbiome. And my audience knows that I'm currently working through some, microbiome re-optimization. So I'm excited to tell you about that and get your opinion. But what are some things that people are just getting wrong about the microbiome? I mean, finally, we're talking about it, right? But what are people getting wrong?
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it didn't really exist in our vocabulary, the word, the microbiome 20 years ago.
Yeah.
It was barely even cited in research papers.
Yeah.
So now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's almost microbiome washing going on everywhere. It's kind of thrown as a buzzword. But the microbiome, although it's infinitely complex, there are some basic things we can do and maybe shouldn't do to take care of it.
Yeah.
So I think it's worth talking about the shouldn't do's because that can directly impact your microbiome in a negative way. And so probably the number one or joint number one thing, the two things would be a lack of fiber, which is also, chronic in our current society. Lack of fiber starves the microbiome of their favorite fuel source. And number two would be the excessive use of antibiotics, both in the food system, but also in our day-to-day lives. If someone has a runny nose and has a viral infection, the temptation often is to just take some antibiotics that you have in your kitchen cabinet.
Yeah.
And both of those are wildly awful for your microbiome.
I think those are two incredible points. So obviously on social media, you are on social media, as am I. It's a lot of conversation around this carnivore diet, right? Or like a keto diet. And so what would you say to those individuals that are really just proclaiming from the rooftops that we don't need fiber?
So I was actually having a chat with my friend about this over lunch today, we were both eating some meat and we were talking about carnivores and people who are on the keto heavy diet. And often I found in patients I've seen over the years who've gone on the carnivore diet, when they cut fiber out of their diet and feel good, that is a symptom of something wrong systemically.
Yeah.
And what happens is that when you take a lot of fiber in a short space of time, or certain fibers which can trigger sensitive guts, and we call high FODMAP fibers, which are highly fermentable,
Yeah.
that can produce symptoms like gas, bloating, etc.
Yeah.
And the problem is, someone thinks that, okay, I've just had fiber, it's caused these GI symptoms like bloating and gas, I need to get rid of fiber. And then they get rid of fiber and then they feel good temporarily for a few weeks, maybe a few months. But long term, you need to fix the system. There's an issue with your system where you're not training your microbiome efficiently and your bacteria haven't adapted to the fiber load. And it's almost like you need to go through that little bit of pain. You know, when you first go to the gym, your muscles can feel sore. So the fix for the muscle soreness is not avoiding the gym forever. It's slowly increasing your tolerance in the gym so you build muscles and you adapt to the gym. And that's the similar situation with this carnivore. You need to slowly increase your fiber intake and your fiber load so your bacteria can process them efficiently, but also be mindful of the type of fibers you consume that are sensitive, useful for sensitive guts as well.
Okay, I would love to talk through, number one, what is fiber doing that makes it so important? And then also, what could a plan look like for someone who has these sensitivities? You know, I'm currently trying to get 30 to 50 plant species per week. So, and I'm typically aiming for about 30 to 40 grams of fiber per day. So would love to, talk about why fiber and what it's doing, why it's so beneficial, and why the narrative about no fiber is wrong. And then what could someone do to start implementing new fibers and what kinds, how often?
Yeah, so at a very basic level, our gut bacteria favorite fuel source and food source is fiber. They ferment other things as well. So they can ferment both fiber, they can ferment protein as well. What happens when you eat some fiber? So right now, if we both had a fiber-rich meal, in several hours, that would reach the colon where there's the biggest concentration of bacteria in our body. And in the colon, they feast on that fiber. We don't have human enzymes to break down fiber from plant foods, but our gut bacteria do. Our gut bacteria start to break down and ferment that fiber. That's a process known as saccharolytic fermentation.
Okay.
And in that process, they break down and eat that fiber and then produce as a byproduct things like short-chain fatty acids and other antioxidants, which are beneficial for us. So one of the most beneficial antioxidants is butyric acid or butyrate. And that nourishes the lining of our colon and reduces the risk of bowel cancer, amongst many other things, and stimulates GLP-1, which is, you know, a wildly popular peptide now in semaglutide, Wegovy, etc. In addition to that, it also helps to increase the absorption of other things. So certain types of fiber can increase the absorption of magnesium, of calcium. These bacteria can produce vitamin B12, vitamin K, which as humans, we can't do in high amounts. So there's really an abundance of things that these bacteria do if you feed them fiber. And it's different fiber types as well. Like you were saying, you want a diversity of different plant points and plant foods. That is great because that feeds different bacteria as well. So if someone wasn't eating enough fiber, the simplest thing to do, I would never say start with 30. If you're eating like used to eating 10 grams of fiber a day, going to 30 is going to put you off fiber. So start small with little things you can do, even if it means that you need to take a fiber supplement to just, start gentle. And very simple things, like for example, chia seeds are going viral on social media, right? There's a reason chia seeds are so good as a source. You can soak them in your pudding or your oats or whatever. 2 tablespoons of chia seeds give you 10 grams of fiber and 6 grams of protein.
Yeah, I love that. I actually have one called Zen basil seeds. Do you guys have this in the UK? So it's actually double the amount of fiber. It looks like a chia seed, but it's a great way that, I've been able to really uptick my fiber intake. So yeah, I'm excited. I think like what we've done with protein, right? Like we've now tried to cram protein into everything. I just saw water with protein in it the other day. We need to be doing that with fiber.
Yeah, my take on that is yes to that, but also the problem I see in this industry. So like there's a whole deluge of better for you snacks coming out that are fiber enriched.
Okay.
The problem is these companies think about the bottom line. They're thinking about profits and losses, right? So they're thinking, how can we get the cheapest possible fiber source in this food or snack so we can sell it? Like all these like prebiotic fiber sodas, they use inulin, which is the cheapest fiber you can get, which causes the most bloating. So some of these snacks may have high fiber, but you also need to look at what type of fiber they're using.
Okay. Well, what type of fibers do we want to?
So you need to ideally have a mix of fibers. So, having inulin is not bad. Like it's found in artichokes, it's found in onions and garlic. It's great. But it can cause bloating in people who've got sensitive guts. So most of these fiber products have inulin. It's not a bad thing. But you also need to look at other sources. Like, are they using natural fibers in their food products? Like, with your bagels, like, are they actually using real foods and seeds as their fiber source, potentially? So just so you get a diversity and not relying on one thing. Like, if you just ate that bagel.
Oh, wait, it's for clarity, not a bagel, Zen basil seeds.
Oh, basil seeds. Sorry.
That's okay. I do not eat bagels.
Yeah. So, for example, if there was a snack that had chips enriched with these basil seeds, like, could that be useful? Yes. But then it's getting variety.
But I know I'm like very much over here on the spectrum of like what I deem to be healthy. I think that these chips infused with, it's still chips. Like at the end of the day,
Correct.
like chips are going to steal your health. Do not let chips steal your health. I used to like, everyone was like, why do you hate chips so much? Because I don't like foods. Because every food I eat, I'm thinking about it from, of course, a macronutrient level, but a micronutrient level. Like I do these labs called micronutrient testing, right? So we know that a lot of foods are just completely void of micronutrients, and it's a complete disaster. So, I mean, yes, I agree that a lot of these brands are trying to, it's kind of like washing or whitewashing, right? To make people feel like they're doing something better, and maybe they are doing something better than eating a Cheeto or Dorito, but it's like, you can refine your palate, like give 3 weeks and your taste buds turn over or something of that nature. So to me, like blueberries taste amazing. You know what I mean? Like you just get used to it. So, okay. So we want different types of, which makes a lot of sense. So what are some other, how do you rank this? Do you say food sources first? When do we come into the supplementation, and how do we find supplements that work best?
Yeah, I mean, I've changed my mind on supplements a whole lot over the years, and I've opened my mind that it's not just about deficiency states in which you will need supplements. It's a lot of things due to lifestyles, our food system, soil, providing low quality produce these days compared to hundreds of years ago. So there are a lot of issues, and I'm definitely open to supplements, and I take a ton myself as well. So, for example, we're talking about like fiber. Why would someone need to take a fiber supplement if they're eating 30 grams of fiber in their food? Well, if we look at some of these subsistence populations, so non-industrial populations living across the world, and one of the most popular is the Hadza tribe in Tanzania, there have been studies showing that these tribal members are eating over 100 grams of fiber a day.
Wow.
And have some of the lowest rates of chronic disease burdens worldwide.
Wow.
Lowest rates of chronic heart disease, heart attacks, cancer, type 2 diabetes, and they're eating 100 grams plus. So if you're eating 30 grams of fiber and you don't feel like eating more food and more calories to get another 10 or 20 grams, a supplement makes sense. Or you skip veggies, you're traveling. I'm traveling in the US at the moment. I've got a bag full of fiber powder because it's not easy to always find fiber-rich foods when I'm traveling and flying. So there are lots of use cases.
Can we go back to what they're eating to get 100 grams of fiber per day?
Yeah, so the whole non-industrial population stuff is fascinating. And this is the amazing thing, they eat seasonally. So during the wet season and dry season, they're just eating what is available to them in their environment. So sometimes in seasons of abundance, they're eating meat with honey, which also has prebiotics. Sometimes they will just be eating tubers and root vegetables in certain seasons. And the funny thing is, the reason they're getting so much fiber is a lot of the foods they eat as well, the sort of plant food they eat, are like root vegetables, which don't taste the best, are very astringent and bitter tasting, but they're rich in fiber. So the actual fiber content of the plant food they consume is higher than the equivalent we'd find in the Western world.
Can you give us a couple of examples of like what are obviously like a sweet potato?
Like a cassava, for example, right? Like a cassava is like a tuber or a root vegetables in that sort of sweet potato family,
Yeah.
but just a lot more rich in resistant starches,
Yeah.
which is like a pseudo fiber or like a prebiotic. And that would be a huge part of their meal. Or like, plantains, like not quite sweet like a banana, but again, rich in fibers and fructooligosaccharides and resistant starches, really just like microbiome fuel.
I love that. So if you were to like design a day of eating to get optimal fiber intake, what would that kind of look like? Or how do you eat?
So, I really prioritize fiber a lot these days because in 2018, I was eating a lot of protein, and a lot of that was coming from saturated fat sources. So my cholesterol was actually quite high, and it took eating a lot of fiber to get that down.
Yeah.
And so my morning, I just look for easy things to consume. So I do have either oats or like a chia seed type pudding thing, where I've got a layer of 2 or 3 tablespoons of chia seeds, throwing some like hemp seeds and flax seeds, and probably some like raspberries or blueberries together. That meal itself would have upwards of 20 grams of fiber.
Nice.
Okay. And I'm used to eating like a high volume of fiber at this point where I'm eating 50 or 60 grams a day.
Wow. Great.
But it took 2 years to get to that point without overwhelming my gut.
Yeah. Quick question about the chia seeds. We always want to be soaking the chia seeds first, right? Or is that a myth?
There is some truth in it. Like if you ate just chia seeds like that, you won't get in trouble, but you need to make sure that you're consuming a lot of water whenever you do it, because you get snacks that are with chia seeds and they're dry.
Yeah. Oh,
You
yeah.
need to consume a lot of water with it, and hydrating it has other benefits as well. So it unlocks the prebiotic value of it, because what happens is if you look on a microscope, when you soak a chia seed in water, it forms this membrane on the outside. That membrane is called the mucilage, and that mucilage layer is actually the fiber being unlocked. So actually, the more you soak it, the better value or better bang for your buck that you get.
Oh, yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so we have breakfast, which is either like an oats or a chia seed pudding with some fruits. And do you put any protein in there, or you just don't?
Yeah, so usually the oats and the chia seeds, obviously they're both plant sources of protein, but they will give plenty of protein. Like oats are rich in protein and fiber, and even the chia seeds as well, rich in protein and fiber. One snack that I probably have it every day now at this point is I have some steamed edamame with chili, garlic, and oil.
Nice.
And edamame is, again, it's a high fiber, high protein snack.
Nice.
And it's also rich in isoflavones, which is also good for gut liver health as well. And so that is just, again, adding some more variety to my day. It's a bean, which also has like special prebiotics. And then probably for lunch, again, what I've done is I'm not a vegan or vegetarian, but what I've done is I've cut down the concentration of meat that I eat. So say I'm having 200 grams of meat, can I cut that down to 100 grams and instead, have the other 100 grams of beans? So I mix it. And so I usually like some sort of pasta with beans, maybe a little bit of meat if I want to. And I have beans a lot during the day as well. I mean, I've not really found many beans when I'm traveling here, but that's something I have as well. And, me and my wife, we're both South Indian. So like rice is like a huge part of our food. I'm not a big fan these days of just white rice. So I try to blend it with other things when I'm cooking it. So if I'm using like a rice cooker to make rice, I'll make sure I have rice with like 3 different types of lentils, like red lentils, yellow lentils, green lentils, and I'll throw in like cumin seeds and barley and quinoa, just so I get a mixture of lots of different pulses and like, products like that. And again, the advantage of all these other things is you get different prebiotics. Like I love barley because barley is rich in beta-glucan, which is a type of prebiotic that's been shown in preliminary studies to reduce the microplastic load in the human body.
I love that. I'll be ordering barley. I do not eat barley,
oats, and quinoa.
Okay, great.
And mushrooms as well.
Oh, wonderful. I had some great quinoa actually at, I stayed at Hotel Cafe Royal. Do you know this one in
the
London?
UK? No.
Yeah. And they had organic food, which was amazing. And they had this great like quinoa salad with some beets and some avocados. Very nice.
Wow.
I mentally saved it to make it at home when I'm not here. So I felt like it was got a lot of good diversity, even when traveling, which I was really appreciative of. Okay, great. So then what about dinner?
Yeah, dinner is often like a mixture of the same. Like if I don't have like a sort of pasta-based bean thing for lunch, I might have it for dinner. And if I haven't had like something rice-based, I might have that. And even when it comes to salads, like a lot of people think if you have a salad, that's going to be high in fiber. The problem is things like lettuce, carrots, they're not high in fiber.
Can you give us like an estimate? Like if you have a small salad, how much fiber are you?
So, for example, per 100 grams of cucumber, per 100 grams of lettuce, you're getting like sub 1 or 2 grams of fiber, which is like quite low.
Yeah.
Right? It's just volume.
Yeah.
So it has its place because it has other micronutrients.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking just at fiber, it probably just doesn't cut the mustard.
Yeah.
And actually the highest fiber sources are seeds, nuts, beans. So by all means, have the salad because you like the taste or whatever. Why not sprinkle on some nuts and seeds onto your salad?
Yeah.
And suddenly you've like tripled the fiber content. And that's what I do. Like I'll have the salad with like, I don't know, red peppers, some lettuce, some onions, some cucumber. That's not high in fiber.
Yeah.
And suddenly I've added to like some seeds, like some flax seeds and some crushed pistachios and whatever. And suddenly now like doubled or tripled the fiber content.
What do you think about soaking seeds or soaking sprouting seeds and nuts? Because they apparently have, a shell that's harder to break down or something?
It does change the food matrix if you like soak it slightly. There's some evidence in some studies like it reduces the phytate content, which allows you to absorb things better. I would say the differences are negligible.
Okay.
Because at the end of the day, like our human enzymes can't digest it, and it's going to be food for our bacteria anyway.
Yeah. Okay. Now going back to probiotic or prebiotic supplementation, well, then let's talk about probiotics versus prebiotics and what you think is, and then there's also postbiotics now.
Yes.
So I want to talk about that whole gamut of different biotics, I suppose. But going back to the fiber, because I want to make sure people have really actionable takeaways here. So I know if you go to something like Thorne, right? Like I tend to go to those practitioner grade supplement companies. I think they have psyllium husk as their primary fiber source, right? But what should we be looking for if we are going to be supplementing?
Yeah, so psyllium husk, I've used that over the years, and I think it's great at doing a specific job, which is adding bulk to your stool. And if you're having trouble with just bulk formation, it's a good bulking fiber. The problem with psyllium husk is that it has very limited prebiotic activity, which means that a prebiotic is defined as a substrate which is useful for your microbiome and can directly influence your microbiome.
Yeah.
And so even though I label inulin as not an ideal fiber, it is a pretty good prebiotic still.
Okay.
Psyllium husk is not.
Okay.
And so if you are having that, you should probably have other fiber sources as well. Like, for example, one of my favorite prebiotics is actually hydrolyzed guar gum. I love that because it's sensitive on the guts and it's got good data for not only bulk formation, but some effects on your cholesterol and bloating. So it's pretty effective, actually. Other things would be like, I know some people find some benefit with like acacia fibers as well. I don't quite like the taste of it, but the data is also emerging on that one. Galacto-oligosaccharides, GOS, probably not ideal if you're dairy free because it has lactose in it, but also very effective, and you just need a very small dose of that. Fructo-oligosaccharides, similar to the prebiotics you find in bananas. You can buy all of these things individually. One thing, which again is great and quite similar to the partially hydrolyzed guar gum, is xylo-oligosaccharides, XOS. You may have seen that on some prebiotic fiber powders. That is also, pretty handy at doing its job.
And you're currently developing one, right?
Yes, I have developed one, which is coming out. And the problem I saw was that a lot of these companies were either underdosing things or not using good quality prebiotics.
Yeah.
So I formulated something which has 6 different prebiotics,
Yeah.
all like synergized in one. and they interact with each other to do different things. Your immune health, your metabolic health and cholesterol and blood sugar regulation, bloating and bowel health in general, and positively influencing different microbiome species. And the problem is, like if you go and take a standard prebiotic fiber from Amazon or wherever you buy them,
hopefully not Amazon though, because they sometimes they like sell fake products,
right?
Fake products there.
So say you order like from your kind of health shop online, you order like a prebiotic fiber powder that might only hit one area of the colon.
Yeah.
And this is the biggest problem with foods as well. And this relates to the food that you eat. If a lot of the foods that you eat don't contain fibers which travel all the way to the distal colon, you are doing a disservice to your microbiome.
Yeah.
Because the most abundance of bacteria live in the distal colon, right at the end before it gets to the rectum.
Interesting.
A lot of the fibers we eat in our daily lives, like apples and oranges and things like that, they're all great fibers, but they start in the early colon or the mid colon, and they feed the bacteria living in those two places because they're at the front of the queue.
Yeah.
But they don't hit the really important and the huge population of bacteria at the back of the queue who are going to be really producing the stuff we need.
Yeah.
So that's why we need stuff like, these kind of like root vegetables and like the resistant starches, those fibers which are harder to break down and make it right to the end. And that's why I built this as well. That's got a blend of all the fibers which go at all areas of the colon, because that's what's missing in our diet. And that replicates the diets of those, hunter-gatherer populations.
I love that. Also, in general, like the magnesium that I take has 7 different forms, because it's like if you're deficient in one form of something, there's a high likelihood that we need to have multiple forms. Most people don't realize this, but traditional laundry detergent is one of the biggest sources of toxins in the home. PFAS, hormone disruptors, synthetic preservatives, all of it ends up on your skin. That's why I switched to the O3 Waterworks Smart Laundry System. It uses only water and oxygen to create O3 Water, an all-natural cleaning solution that cleans and deodorizes your clothes without any detergent or chemicals. No toxins, no hormone disruptors, and no body detergent ever again. Plus, unlike other systems, there are no filters or replacements. Just one machine that does it all on demand. If you care about eliminating hidden toxins, supporting your hormones, or you have allergies or sensitivities, this is a must-have. You can get 20% off with my code Kayla. You can also see the link in the show notes. Now, back to the episode. Let's talk about prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics, what they're useful for, what they're not. I'm also, interested in your take on some of this new like longevity data for microbiome with like acromantia. So yeah, let's get into it.
So we've covered what prebiotics are, and they're basically fuel for probiotics. So probiotics are living organisms, the microbes that live in your body. The prebiotics feed the probiotics, right? And then once the probiotics are fed with prebiotics, they produce postbiotics, things like short-chain fatty acids and other beneficial compounds. And now we've got supplements for each of those categories: prebiotics, probiotics, postbiotics. They're not all necessarily high in data quality. So for example, the data and quality of postbiotics is emerging. I think there is some good science there, but we need to be careful about what we're putting into our bodies, because they may not be doing much, because there's 2 types of postbiotics. There's postbiotics like butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid produced by certain bacteria, which are then packaged into a postbiotic.
Yeah.
There's also postbiotics, which are basically dead bacteria that act as a postbiotic, because what happens is a lot of these bacteria have like immune receptors and immune proteins on their cell. But even when they die, those, proteins and things that live on the bacteria are still resistant to heat or death, and they can still trigger and train our immune systems, so they can still have an influence on our health.
Yeah.
Right? Which is why sometimes even if you consume a probiotic supplement and someone says, oh, it's not going to survive because all the probiotics are going to be killed by the stomach acid, that may be true. But as those dead bacteria are passing through our gut, they can still influence, those dead bacteria can still influence the immune system, because they've got these little antigens and receptors on them which can, play with the immune system.
Interesting. So also a question about probiotics. They're quite transient, no?
Yeah,
So,
they're very transient.
yeah. What about spore-based probiotics?
Yeah, a lot more hardy.
Yeah.
And this is why I think nowadays you're seeing a lot of probiotic sodas as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
A lot of probiotic sodas are not using the right type of probiotic, and you should probably be using a spore-based probiotic in those kind of drinks. They are more hardy, but then I also wonder if they're more hardy and more resilient, is there a risk that they can shift populations of our own internal bacteria and cause like an imbalance in them? So I would be, just take a bit of caution with spore-based probiotics as well.
What makes it spore-based?
It's basically like yeast rather than actual bacteria. That's, how they kind of spread as well. So it's just how it grows and populates within cells and within cultures.
Got it. So out of these three, you feel like the prebiotic is the most important. Let's say you were only going to take one of these, what one would you choose?
I've been taking prebiotics for years because, and I mentioned this to you before, if you think of your gut as a garden, you want the soil quality to be at its highest to allow any plants that you put in there, any flowers that you plant to flourish. So instead of focusing on buying new flowers and plants, worry about the soil quality, which is our gut lining and our gut. So feed that soil so it's enriched. And that's the whole role of prebiotics.
Okay. So next question for you. What do you think about fecal transplants?
I think that could be revolutionary for people in the future. There are some people who do DIY fecal transplants. I wouldn't recommend that, but there have been some anecdotal, amazing miracle stories.
So they're taking someone's actual feces and like putting it up there?
Literally, yeah. Like there was a case report I saw in BBC News years ago, I believe, where someone took their mother's feces or something, and I don't know how they did it, but then they inserted it into themselves and kind of resolved their chronic gut issues.
Wow. Can you explain for the audience like what this fecal transplant is and how it might be exciting?
Yeah, so like the full technical scientific name is FMT, fecal microbiota transplant. And this probably is worth saying. A lot of people interchangeably use the word microbiota and microbiome. Microbiota refers to the population of microbes. The microbiome is the genetic profile of those microbiota. But for simplicity, I use them interchangeably because that's what everyone understands.
So, but just so I know, microbiota is the
actual
bacteria, and then the microbiome is how they're being expressed, kind of, or
yeah, it's their genes, their genetic profile, like their DNA, basically.
And all these gut bacteria all have their own genetic makeup.
Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
Because how many bacteria typically are in a microbiome?
Probably somewhere in the order of like 30 to 40 trillion. And then if you add in all the viruses and fungi and archaea, you're thinking 100 trillion.
It's insane. Like you can't even comprehend that, right?
Their genetic makeup significantly outweighs our genetic material.
Yeah, we're more bacteria than human, right?
I've always had this philosophical thought with friends, like all the actions we take, the cravings we have, the feelings that we feel, the emotions we express, and the choices we make, is that our choice or our bacteria's choice? And there's no way currently to answer that because we know now the gut-brain axis, who's controlling who.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild. Also, I'm so intrigued by, I was telling you some of the gut testing I've done in the past. There's a test, the Vibrant Wellness Gut Zoomer, and I find it really intriguing. I'm curious your thoughts. So it'll have a breakdown of, bacteria that are, linked to potential conditions. So it'll have a section for, maybe Alzheimer's disease or something. What do you feel about some of these bacteria-specific species can influence some of these negative health outcomes?
Yeah, 100%. Like, for example, just using a specific example, there's a certain type of bad bacteria called Fusobacterium nucleatum, which is found in the gum lining. Mm-hmm. We have found that same Fusobacterium nucleatum in colon cancers. And so that further establishes a link between a certain type of bacteria and a certain chronic disease process, and also between the mouth and the gut and, different organ systems.
Yeah.
So Fusobacterium nucleatum also increases the risk of gum disease, periodontitis, but it also could be linked to dysbiosis and gut problems like, bowel cancers. So there's actually certain bacteria are more likely to potentially cause certain chronic diseases. Like, there's emerging data suggesting that there could be an association with gut bacteria and Parkinson's, gut bacteria and Alzheimer's. I think we're at the precipice of finding more answers, but we need more and more research.
And what's the best approach here? Let's say that you are doing gut testing, what probably only a small percentage of people are even doing. It's also like the least glamorous test in the world, right? It's like first time I did one, I had to like toss it out because I just couldn't do it.
Oh, really?
You're literally like, you're pooping your own poop and then putting it into a thing and then shaking it. It's like very bad.
Yeah, it is.
But it's also, I think, one of the most like important tests, because the gut is just the foundation of health. Our immune system, our dopamine, all this stuff. When I was running this like longevity medicine clinic, we would just see once the gut improved, so many other things, sort of resolved.
I mean, one of the greatest signals and data points your body gives you is your poop, and we just throw it away.
Yeah.
Right? And like blood testing is great. I do blood testing once a year and I find it so valuable, but that's expensive. You have to pay for that. This, you're just looking at it often. We sometimes don't even look at it.
Yeah.
You should be looking at it at the very least. Even if you don't do a microbiome test, you should be looking at it.
Yeah.
These microbiome tests, I think there also should be some sort of preparation before you do it.
Yeah.
Because you don't want what you take to influence the actual test. So I would suggest actually, if you're doing a microbiome test, stop any prebiotics or probiotics or whatever you can that could influence your gut probably the week leading up to the test. So it's like as clean as possible and you don't get these sort of aberrant signals in that data.
Yeah.
And I think it's highly valuable. I've done it a couple of times and you can definitely gain some insights about your personal health from that.
Yeah, I agree. Well, I'm excited to tell you what I'm kind of dealing with. You can give me your opinion in a few, but okay, now that we're moving on in general from microbiome, like basics, post and prebiotics, I want to talk about the differences in female and male microbiomes, if there are any, what that looks like.
Yeah, again, the unfortunate thing is that and it's a story we see time and time again, the women's microbiome and women's health research isn't as advanced in general.
Yeah.
So when we're looking at differences between male and female microbiome, there are very few studies which explore the differences. And based on the limited data, there seem to be some differences. And those differences appear to be that the female microbiome tends to be higher in diversity than the male microbiome. Now, we often associate more diversity with something better. That's not always the case. It could be better and likely is probably better. But we also need to look at the function. So we need to do deeper testing on that diversity to see that is there enough functional overlap and improvements in one versus the other. The other interesting difference, which isn't a difference between the actual microbiome, but just the difference in physiology between what a man goes through and a woman goes through, there are more fluctuations in the female microbiome in her life cycle because of periods, potentially pregnancy, potentially perimenopause, menopause, other things they may take like oral contraceptive pill or HRT. All of these things influence the female microbiome so much, and just the monthly menstrual cycle has such huge shifts on it, because how estrogen and progesterone interact with it, diet. So I would say from that point of view, the female microbiome is getting so much hammering in a woman's life compared to a man. So I would say it's so important that a woman nourishes and takes care of the microbiome because it has so many effects on hormonal health and reproductive health as well.
Yeah. Do we know much about, so I have heard, and I haven't researched this a ton myself, but that as estrogen and hormones begin to decline in like perimenopause and menopause, it can potentially make the gut microbiome a little bit more dysbiotic. I wonder, what's the mechanism there?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it does happen where there is some dysbiosis and it can cause, common symptoms that a lot of people may resonate with in perimenopause or menopause, like bloating, constipation, potentially even diarrhea, and just some like stomach pains as well. Again, it's very poorly understood what exactly goes on, but, we have in our gut lining, well, not particularly in my gut lining compared to a woman's, but there are estrogen and progesterone receptors all throughout the GI tract, particularly in the colon as well. And so estrogen and progesterone can sometimes increase or decrease the motility of food transit through there as well. And it can influence constipation, it can influence bowel, like the functional health. So if someone is more constipated as a result of declining estrogen or progesterone levels, constipation is associated with more stagnation of microbes, and that might put someone more into dysbiosis. And could that constipation lead to SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and which further compounds the issue? So there are several mechanisms at play. Which one leads to the other? It's a bit of a chicken and egg. And is it that causing a disturbance in the microbiome, or is it then the microbiome disturbance causing all of these issues? It's difficult to pick apart.
Yeah. How many times should people be going to the bathroom, number 2, per day?
Looking at all the data, and generally also based on patients I've seen, so the Goldilocks zone seems to be between 3 times a day to 3 times a week. However, I will caveat this by saying you shouldn't just focus on quantitative metrics like the numbers. You should also be looking at qualitative data. Like, you could go every single day to the toilet and still be constipated. If you're still feeling bloated, if you're still feeling the sensation that you've not fully evacuated, if you're straining a lot, if you don't feel quite right, you're pooping small rabbit pellets, you could still be constipated and go once a day, which is a crazy thing to think, right?
Yeah.
You could go once every other day and be perfectly fine as well, which a lot of people might be thinking, that's weird. But it's so different and variable based on who you are as a person. But I would say 3 times a day, 3 times a week, but also see, are you getting other symptoms as well with that?
Yeah, such as bloating and etc., pain, things of that nature.
Bloating, pain, straining, the characterization of the stool, like how does it look? Is there any blood in the stool? Is it hard and small? Is there any mucus associated with it? Is it floating? So all those things are important to take into account.
Do you like the Bristol stool chart?
I do like it purely because it gives a quick visual snapshot of what's normal and what's not. But also, I think it could evolve. We need now, because that is so old now, we need an evolution.
What is the perfect shape?
If you look at the Bristol stool chart, so anyone watching or listening happens to look up on Google Bristol stool chart, type 3, type 4, which is like smooth, snake-like or slightly cracked, like a sausage, that's like the ideal shape, size, and consistency for a good poop.
Why would there be mucus?
Could be a lot of reasons. So if you have issues with your digestion, digestive enzymes, or pancreas, and you're not producing enough of the enzyme which digests fat, lipase, you could have excessive stool in your diet as well. Some people who are on weight loss injections like Ozempic, where they're not absorbing all of the food and they're getting, a lot of that food and fat is being excreted in the stool. They're consuming a high-fat diet potentially. So there's a ton of both benign, but also some pathological causes in which someone could have a stool, like mucus in the stool and fat in the stool as well.
And what about, we're just really going deep on this area, but it's so normal for me and obviously normal for you. So what about the floating? What is the floating signal?
Yeah, so the floating could also be, it can be normal, right? You can just have a lot of air in the thing, or you had a particularly high fat meal, so it floats a bit more. So that's not particularly always a bad sign, but if it's consistently always just floating and nothing else, again, why is there an excessively high fat content, and maybe there's an issue with bulk formation? Is it not as heavy as it should be, or as well hydrated as it should be? So those are things to just think about, but not worry about immediately.
I feel like in the US, so let's say someone is having digestive issues and they go to see a GI doctor, it just doesn't seem as comprehensive as it should be. Like, obviously you've been working in the system and this is what you do. Where can people actually turn to resolve gut issues? Because, it just seems a bit bleak. Like, I'll give you an example. So, we had a patient once at the clinic that had been diagnosed with Crohn's, right? Okay. well, I mean, his doctors kind of just said, well, this is what you have. I think there's a few medications that you can maybe take or something. But when he found his way to us, we did a full, gut workup with the stool testing and put him even on some like oral BPC and KPV and made massive improvements. We're able to help this individual like kind of put that into remission a little bit or at least not be symptomatic. How do people find good gut care?
It is very difficult. And I will say this as someone who's seen thousands of patients with gut health problems and who's been involved with removing bowel cancers, treating diverticular disease, inflammatory bowel disease. I've seen the full gamut of gut health issues. And even I didn't fully appreciate what I should be appreciating when I was seeing those patients over the years. I never gave detailed microbiome advice to those patients. And I'm pretty sure most of my colleagues didn't, and people in the system didn't as well. Because of time issues, lack of understanding maybe about the microbiome, because on a clinical day-to-day basis, you're dealing with, life and death things, and maybe it's not appropriate to talk about the microbiome when, someone's hemorrhaging from their colon, right?
Yeah.
But I think those are the things with the factors, which are the limiting factors in advancing preventative care in that reactive model. And I think if someone is looking to improve their gut health, I think learning more about what you need and not. Like, for example, this conversation we've had, most people don't know what a prebiotic is, what a probiotic is, what a postbiotic is. So understanding the basic anatomy of the gut, understanding like the microbiome, and then just exploring it more and more, maybe doing a gut test so you learn a bit more about what's good, what's bad, and what's baseline for you. Keeping a track of your poop health. Okay, what's normal for me, what's not normal for me. And then you begin to just be more curious. And I think we're both so curious that we've learned so much on our own that's not been taught to us.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I didn't notice I noticed that you didn't mention was fermented foods in your diet. What are your thoughts on these?
So as someone who is like South Indian, we eat a lot of fermented foods naturally. So I don't know if you've ever heard of two foods, one called an idli and one called a dosa.
No, neither.
So a dosa is essentially like a savory pancake.
Okay.
And it requires like you crush and grind together rice, some lentils, and you ferment it overnight. It's a 24-hour fermentation process. And then like using olive oil or whatever you want, you just kind of like fry it in like a pan. And then you can have that with like some like a spicy dip that you can also ferment and make, using like cabbages or beets or whatever, and you have it with that. And that's like a staple in South India. There's actually been studies looking at the microbiome in certain rural South Indian populations.
Yeah.
And they've got unique bacterial species which aren't found anywhere else in the world. Idli is also similar. It's like a steamed bun, also fermented batter.
Okay.
So during my day, I would probably eat fermented foods like that. And, I drink probably 2 cups of coffee a day. Coffee is also technically a fermented food because the bean is fermented. But a lot of the data suggests that fermented food is actually great for us. Most people would benefit from daily consumption of some fermented food.
Yeah, so I do a couple different things. So either like a fermented vegetable, like a carrot, a beet, some of the sauerkraut, or also some like probiotic yogurts, fermented type of yogurt. So I really enjoy that. Okay, great. All right, well, let me tell you a little bit what I had going on. I told you before the podcast, but if anyone has experienced something similar, so worked incredibly hard on my gut health. I've always really prioritized it. Had, as close to perfect of a gut report from my old testing companies that were GI effects. So across the board, 0 is the best, 10 is the worst. It's looking at measurements of inflammation. It's looking at measurements of leaky gut, etc. And I was doing quite well. But I had to go on these antibiotics twice now, once for a procedure that I had last year and then another time more recently. And my gut, I've gotten 2 recent gut tests and they're both it's struggling majorly and actually having a little bit of leaky gut. And I can tell, like, it's very clear to me when the gut is off because, I'm a little bit more symptomatic and typically I'm not at all. So what would be like your kind of plan to amend? First of all, we need to work on, improving the gut lining and I would love for you to talk to the audience too, why, number one, I think leaky gut is incredibly common. What is that and why is it harmful and how do we fix it?
Would it also be helpful, because I had so many questions about this from friends and family about like a protocol for gut recovery and gut improvements pre and post antibiotics. Maybe that's something we can talk about.
Would love that.
But yeah, so leaky guts on its own is not a disease. It's a symptom of something going on. So between the cells of our colon, there are small gaps, right? And we need those gaps to allow beneficial things to pass through, the immune cells to pass through, because our gut and the immune system are very closely connected. We can't have like a completely tight sealed junction everywhere.
Yeah. Okay.
Also, between these cells, you get these tight junctions or tight junction proteins, which make sure that the gaps between the cells aren't too big. So then you can get toxins leaking into the bloodstream and bad bacteria. We don't want that.
Yeah.
Because that can cause inflammation and gut problems and problems beyond the gut as well, like brain fog and, worse. What happens when you get leaky gut? The scientific terminology is intestinal hyperpermeability, where the gaps are just too big now.
Yeah.
And that can result from a number of reasons, from too low fiber in your diet, or you're actually stressing your guts with, for example, marathon runners have shown to have leaky gut symptoms post-marathon.
Yeah.
Because of that stress of a marathon. Like, it's a huge stress on the body.
Yeah.
Just mental stress, like chronic mental stress, can also result in leaky gut symptoms as well. And alcohol, inflammatory, compounds that you may consume as well, other things. All of these things can like inflame the lining or cause that leaky gut.
So it inflames it and then it just moves slightly further than it should be open.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that is, pretty harmful, allowing more of the toxic substances to enter the bloodstream. But also, leaky gut is one thing, but also the actual lining, it needs to be mucus rich. Sometimes that mucus layer can degrade as well. And you need a balance. You don't want too much mucus. You don't want too little mucus, because that's a protective lubricant for the bowels. And also it's food for Akkermansia, for example. Akkermansia muciniphila. It loves to feed and eat mucus. And that's often a bacterial species associated with longevity.
Yeah.
Like some of these women live in Okinawa who are kind of considered a blue zone or healthy population. They have some of the highest concentrations of Akkermansia.
Yeah, I love that. Also, there was, I don't want to derail us, but the woman that just passed that was 117.
Maria something, yes.
Yes. They did some, biological workups on her, and she had a great gut microbiome, seemingly. So
3 yogurts a day.
Yeah. Sorry?
She had 3 yogurts a day.
Oh, wow. Okay, yeah. I didn't get that far into it. But yeah, I know she did have a slightly higher cholesterol, and she also had very good gut microbiome, low inflammation. So it was interesting to see that. So, okay, let's say, and please mention the antibiotic gut, because I think people don't realize how detrimental. Obviously, I have firsthand hard data to show, but I don't think that many individuals know how harmful antibiotics are. And of course, I want to put the caveat that antibiotics save lives, right? Like we need these, of course, using in the right dose. I wouldn't have taken them if I didn't need to. So can you just expand on that? But what can we also do for the antibiotic protocol, and then also a leaky gut protocol?
Yeah, so nowadays we've evolved more advanced antibiotics, which are a bit more precision and can target with a bit more specificity certain bad bacterial species, but there is collateral damage.
Yeah.
Like if you fire a gun into a crowd, you'll probably get the bad guys, but you'll probably hit civilians as well. And that's kind of what happens with antibiotics. In fact, there was a huge study done on nurses in the UK, over 14,000 women, and they looked at a period of over 4 years. And nurses who had taken at least 2 months worth of antibiotics in those 4 years had lower mental test scores, performance and memory scores.
Yeah.
And that was the link between the gut and brain axis, showing the sort of the detrimental effects of antibiotics beyond the gut.
Yeah.
And it takes such a long time for the gut to rebalance and reach equilibrium after antibiotics, sometimes months up to a year plus.
Yeah.
I've had antibiotics in my life, and I've also had antibiotics as I've gained more knowledge about the microbiome, and I've developed a sort of protocol for that. If you know that you're going to have to take antibiotics, for example, your upcoming surgery or a procedure, and you're going to take antibiotics, you can actually prepare your gut to be more resilient, so it mitigates the effect of antibiotics.
Yeah.
And what you need to be doing is laying the foundation for that and eating more diverse prebiotic fibers in your diet in the 2 weeks leading up to it.
Okay.
That's like the first thing you need to do.
Yeah.
During your antibiotic course, there's two things you do. You maintain that prebiotic fiber diet. So any existing bacteria that are there, you can still like provide them the ammo to flourish and survive, right? Like you're basically providing, Red Cross aid to your microbes.
Yeah.
And you also add in either a clinically validated probiotic during the course, and your doctor or practitioner should ideally prescribe that, because that can reduce the risk of developing a horrible infection like Clostridium difficile afterwards. And if you do develop diarrhea, it can limit the duration of that. So I think a clinically validated probiotic during that is good, and also layering in these probiotic rich foods like you mentioned before, sauerkraut, yogurt, things like that. Immediately after the antibiotics, your gut is going to be very sensitive. So the fibers you consume, you don't want to be consuming lots of insoluble fibers or resistant starches. You want to be having low FODMAP soluble fibers, which are gentle on the gut, but still ferment and give you the beneficial effects of fiber. And you also want to be making sure you continue the probiotic rich foods as well, and you keep increasing slowly.
Yeah.
And also, crucially as well, adding in polyphenol-rich foods for the antioxidant effect.
What are some of your favorite low FODMAP but still, able to ferment foods? And then what are some of your favorite polyphenols, like berries or?
Yeah, absolutely. If you look at for the polyphenols, the total antioxidant concentration is highest in blackberries, blueberries, and raspberries. With any berry, you can't go wrong. But any darkly colored plant or vegetable, so like really dark red, dark shades of like purple, blue, you're onto a winner. Like, beets or whatever, that's kind of like ideal. In terms of like this kind of like low FODMAP type fibers, like for example, an apple would be like high FODMAP.
Yeah.
And that would sort of irritate. So you could swap the apple for a kiwi, for example. A grape would potentially be high FODMAP. So you can switch that into something else, which would be a bit more gentle, potentially like a cherry or something like that. Or if you're having, I don't know, there's like certain types of vegetables which also be high FODMAP. Favorite ones I like to have would be things like okra. They are very low FODMAP and very friendly for your gut. And if you search in low FODMAP foods, you'll get an entire list of fruits and vegetables which you can take for a sensitive gut. And they are by no means lower in quality nutritionally or for your guts.
Yeah.
It's just helpful for a sensitive gut.
Yeah, that is helpful. Okay, so we have antibiotic protocol out of the way. What would you start doing for leaky gut?
For a leaky gut, it would actually be quite similar to this kind of like, antibiotic protocol. But there are so many factors, because ultimately you need to get down to the root cause of what is contributing to these leaky gut symptoms, right? Is it actually a disease process like irritable bowel syndrome, inflammatory bowel disease? Have you got something more sinister going on? Is it a result of your diet? Is it stress levels? Are you not sleeping enough and that's contributing to the stress, cortisol spikes, and leaky gut? So there's a sort of multimodal approach that you need to take. And it's actually looking through your day-to-day and seeing like what is, and this is the role I see. Like, I see the gut as a dynamic interface for your daily life. Think of it as a biological wearable which you can track.
Yeah.
So if you're wearing an Oura Ring, if you're wearing a Whoop, Apple Watch, whatever, you should use those metrics to also track as proxies of your gut. And so if your HRV is chronically like, not in the right zone, or if you're not sleeping well, those are all contributing to your leaky gut.
Yeah. The only thing about the gut that is a little bit more complicated or nuanced is you sometimes can be exposed to something outside of your control, like whether that be like food poisoning or like a virus or a pathogen or something of that nature. So that's the only thing, like even if you try to do everything really optimal, that yeah. So I'll tell you a few things that I'm doing and tell me if it's, so I'm having bone broth on an empty stomach. I'm having a lot of like high collagen to hopefully repair that, a little bit of L-glutamate. And then I'm also obviously doing 30 to 50 plant species per week. And I'm also doing, an oral BPC peptide to help to rebuild.
I just had a thought which would be relevant to this leaky gut thing. One of the most low-hanging fruit things you can do would be having like, I wouldn't say a fasting protocol, but having periods of no food in the day, like long periods, right? And obviously it depends, like if you're diabetic, you need to sort of adjust that within your, life cycle and speak to your, primary care physician or whoever to make sure that's, healthy and safe. But we've got something called the MMC, which is like a motor complex, the major motor complex, or, it's like this wave-like contraction of our guts. And when you keep eating, the MMC doesn't function. I want you to think of the MMC as like a Roomba. It just comes and cleans the room everywhere, right? And if you keep eating, it's not going to work. It needs you to go away and then it'll clean. So when you stop eating and there is stasis in your gut, that's when the MMC activates and it starts cleaning up all the food debris and just, like clears the floor of all the waste. So if you have long periods of not eating, like 5, 6, 7 hours plus, that's great for just cleaning up all the food debris, dead microbes, mucus, and that can reduce bloating, reduce any leaky gut symptoms potentially. So the best way to do this without kind of thinking about it too much is limit the timing of your last meal of the day. So if you can
eat at 4 p.m. and then I'm done.
Amazing. Yeah. So I was going to say, like, if you can do it anytime before 7 p.m., that would be ideal. And then, like, maybe if you can, delay breaking your fast in the morning. So maybe mid-morning if you can. Right?
Okay, that's a great,
extends that thing. So, okay, say you for, like, even if it wasn't 4 p.m., say, like, your last meal was at 7 p.m. And then your next meal or drink or whatever in the morning is at 10 a.m. You've now got 14, 15 hours where you've fasted. And that is actually truly great.
I love that. Well, this has been amazing. Is there any other pieces of information that you feel like people should know about the gut microbiome or?
I would say go and look at some of these non-industrial populations, and it's not just in Africa in the Hadza tribe. There's like the Simane tribe, there's the Yanomami tribe in the Amazon, there's certain tribes in northern and southern India. Just looking at the habits they have, not just their food habits, but the lifestyles they have, we can learn a lot about why their microbiomes are so good.
I mean, that's kind of ideal, I suppose. Well, I don't know. They're probably really stressed about other things, like maybe finding food. But, this very modern world is just so difficult to operate on for optimal health, obviously. I mean, we see the numbers. I don't know what the stats are in the UK, but I mean, 40% of Americans have two chronic diseases. 60% have one chronic disease. It's wild. So we have a lot of work to do, and I think a lot of that starts with the gut microbiome. So
couldn't agree more.
Well, where can people find you?
You can find me everywhere, Instagram and beyond, at Dr. Karan Rajan.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such a pleasure.
Pleasure's all mine.
All right. Well, thank you, and we'll include everything in the show notes.